Good morning. Do you ever have those memories of moments in childhood when it's an ordinary moment, but you remember it with such clarity, yay, many years later? I have such a memory. I remember sitting on my front porch, which had steps about like this, small little front porch, and I had the thought, I will never see my face. Not really. Why? Because I can't take my eyeballs out and turn them around to look at me. And that bothered me. It really bothered me. How can I go through my entire life without seeing the real me? And I realized that all I would ever be able to see was a reflection in a mirror, or maybe a chrome fender, or whatever it is that was the reflecting object. The funny thing about a mirror is you know that it's a reverse image. So you look and you think your hair's parted to the right, but everyone else is seeing it parted to the left. That bothered me too. This reverse image of a mirror, I've contemplated it and I thought, what is this actually telling me? And for me, the meaning I make of this is anytime I look into the outer world for the truth of something, I'm not necessarily going to get the truth. It's often going to be exactly the opposite. For instance, we could take someone's behavior and say, well, they just seem to be in a negative space, they seem to be critical, they seem to be stingy, they seem to be irritable all the time. And on the surface, that is true. But maybe the opposite is also true. Maybe that person is scared. Maybe that person doesn't have the skill sets or the tools, or has never been given the opportunity to really feel comfortable with him or herself. That's the deeper truth. And we only find these deeper truths when we look and examine our lives. Plato said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So when I examine my life, what I see is only as good or as clear and precise as the consciousness with which I'm looking. So it's a good practice for me to ask, what are my motives? What are my motives? Am I examining a certain portion of my life so I can find evidence to prove that my opinions are the correct one, or that decisions I have made in the past were really and truly ultimately the best, regardless of outcome? Why am I asking these questions? Am I looking for maybe the core root of some source of discomfort? And if I examine my life and the ways that this discomfort has shown up in the past, maybe I can root that out and alleviate my suffering. Am I examining my life just to see really what it is I believe and to navigate through that maze into the light of freedom where I am not bound by my beliefs of limitation and lack? Or maybe I am trying to understand myself more deeply in order to understand someone else more deeply. Indeed, every other person I meet. It's important to ask the question, because in asking the question, a reason will surface. And our reason for doing anything or asking anything is always tied to a value. So a core question here for living with integrity is to ask, what do I value? What do I value? Because that guiding value will determine our behavior. You know, we may speak about values. Oh yes, I believe in unconditional love, and let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. And we speak of these values of love and peace, but the truth is always revealed in our behavior. In our behavior. How am I showing up in the world? So as I review my life, I have to ask, what is my purpose for doing so? My purpose for examining my life on a continuing basis is so that I can align and realign continually with my innermost self, that spiritual essence of who I really am, the spiritual essence that you also have an equal measure, and every person on the face of the earth has an equal measure because it's unlimited. The divine self. I want to align and realign with that. When I align with that spiritual essence, then I make choices from a place of integrity. So when we speak of integrity, there are many definitions of integrity. There are many examples of integrity. The first one that will come up in a dictionary is honesty or high moral principles, living by high moral principles. But when I speak of integrity, I like the second definition, that which is coherent, that which is unified. Because when something is coherent and unified, there is an inner strength, and there is a clarity, and there is a power. So living a life of integrity means that we're coming from that place of coherence and not incoherence. We're coming from the place of clarity about what we stand for and what we believe, and then our actions reflect that. There are few qualities that are necessary in order to develop one's integrity and to live from this place. The first quality is courage. It takes courage to make this inner journey, to turn your inner eyes upon yourself, and to be willing to see what is there, to make that journey without an agenda, to allow the Spirit to reveal to you what it is that you need to see for your own good. It takes courage to live the spiritual life, to surrender to this essence, this thing without form that permeates everything, that is the intuitive voice, it is the heartbeat, it is the life force itself that's intelligent. To surrender to that takes a great deal of courage. It takes a great deal of courage to tell the truth. To tell the truth. That can be a very scary thing, telling the truth. But as the scripture says, if God be for you, who can be against you? And if God is all there is, how can the truth ever be harmful? In our 9 o'clock discussion group, someone said, we have an obligation to tell the truth, but we don't have to tell the god-awful truth. Always tell the truth with compassion. Always tell the truth with compassion. That's the compassionate thing to do. Because without that, clarity cannot exist. The other person or the people involved do not have the opportunity to reflect upon themselves and to adjust so that we all come into alignment with this spiritual presence, this divine presence. Some people think that living with integrity means I don't compromise ever. Well, I don't agree with that. There's a difference between living with integrity from your spiritual self and living with your preferences. You know, if you say tomato and I say tomato, should we really call the whole thing off? Am I out of integrity if I can live with that? Of course not. Compromise is necessary in order to create a synergistic third relationship that is greater than the two people involved. But when we compromise our spiritual values over and over and over again, then what happens is our integrity becomes compromised. Our life becomes incoherent, and we find ourselves feeling lost. Reviewing one's life takes courage, and it also takes compassion. Because when we sit and meditate and contemplate, memories may surface of times when we did not act from our values, things we said that were hurtful, even though they were the god-awful truth. We can begin to have compassion for our own journey, for our own disappointments in life, for the things that we have needed to release and grieve. We have compassion for ourselves. And to the degree that we have compassion for ourselves, we can have compassion for other people on their journey. Because you know what? We are just alike. Yeah. You may think, oh, I'm not like so-and-so over there, and I'm not like so-and-so over there. Yeah. We are just alike. As human beings, we all feel fear. We know what that feels like. It doesn't matter what you are afraid of. To be in a state of fear is a shared experience common to us all. And we all know what it feels like when we're in that state of joy, in that state of expanded love. It may be for different reasons. Again, your life may be showing up completely different from mine. However, we have a common experience of life. So to be compassionate for the whole predicament we find ourselves in is a wonderful key to moving and living with integrity, moving into and living with integrity. Do you know about the courage and the compassion? Sometimes life gives us a little push. You know, I'm from Tennessee. I really am a country girl. I love my urban living, but I'm a country girl too. And back in my 20s, I lived in a house that I actually built with recycled lumber. That's another story, if I haven't told you that one. Someday maybe I will. But the neighbors would all get together and go to this little country road where there was a one-lane bridge, and there was a river that passed underneath the bridge that was narrow, but it was deep. And on the side, there was a little sandy beach. So people would while away the weekend afternoon with their towels on the beach, and people would go to the bridge and jump into the river right off the bridge. So I remember the first time I'm standing on the bridge, right? And I'm looking at that water. I'm looking at that water. And I'm really trying to get my courage up to make the leap. When my neighbor Frank walks behind me and goes and shoved me into the river, screaming and flailing, I splat right into the water, go under the water, and I come up and swim over to the shore, and part of me was angry, and the other part of me was grateful. What an exhilarating experience. So after that, I had the courage to do that a couple of more times. Little kids were doing it all over the place, you know. So sometimes life gives us a push so that we can experience something different that we didn't even know we would enjoy. To be in a different place than what we have known. You know, it could be a relationship that pushes. It could be a job that pushes, a person that pushes, an inner knowing that pushes. But it takes courage. It takes courage to answer that, and compassion for the journey as we live from a place of integrity. When we can live like this, when our choices can come from this place of groundedness, then life really does become easier. It becomes easier, but it also becomes fine-tuned. We become discerning about what is in integrity and what is not. You know, in speaking the truth, there are times when I believe it's not wise to speak the truth. An example would be my dear mom, who has dementia. She's convinced. She's a little girl. Her parents are alive, and I don't know who I am. I'm her daughter, too. I don't know how. It's all one world without boundaries. And not realizing her state, that she could not rationally hear the truth, she was talking about her parents. And would she ever see them again, and why didn't they come and see her? And this is when she had first moved into the care facility where she is. And I just said, well, Mother, you know, she died. And my mother went into wailing and rocking and crying, why didn't someone tell me? Why didn't someone tell me? Have I been here this long? I was totally shaken with that. So now I have learned that whatever she says, that's right. Yeah, how's Mom and Daddy doing? They're fine, Mother. They're in their right place. You know, they are fine. So, truth without compassion can be viewed as a weapon sometimes. But I'm reminded that the scripture says truth is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it can cut through the ties that bind and allow you to be free. The truth will make you free. And on the other hand, that cutting away of illusion can be a tough process. But it is absolutely essential if you are committed to living from the place of truth and therefore a place of integrity, so that that inner strength is yours. It's yours. So that someday, when you look at your reflection in the mirror, you realize, I can see face to face because I am looking with my inner eyes. I am looking with my inner eyes. And what I see is a clear channel from the essence of who I am that flows through my mind, through my changing emotions, into expression in the world in full bloom. Jesus said, as you see me, you see the one who sent me. If you see me, you see the Father. So that is the result of living with integrity. The spiritual essence of who we are flows easily through all of our human experience into full expression, so that we are viewing life from our inner eyes. And when we look in the mirror, we see the one that is true.